Welcome to the show. The champions rocked up to Inchicore on Friday night and left with a well deserved point, some standout performances, clean sheet, and we look forward ahead to two big games this weekend against Bohemians. Neither Dunny or I were lucky in the ticket lottery last week, but we are certainly both here this evening. Dunny, how are you? You're very welcome.
Thanks very much, Andy. Yeah, caffeinated and ready to go.
Yeah, good to have you. So there's only one place to start at the home of the champions, or should I say, the champions were in town last Friday. The Real Reds, Pats, who everyone thinks are the greatest team on earth. Um,
Mm.
for nil all, it was an interesting nil all, and most importantly, it's two away games in a row. We've taken 4 points, two very good results. Your overall initial thoughts, Dunny, of Friday night's event in Inchicore?
Yeah, Andy, I think most people were kind of looking at this game as obviously being, a very big challenge. We have injury issues and so on that we can probably dig into in a little bit. Um, and I think a lot of people like myself are maybe looking at this game being sort of tied to upcoming fixture now against Bohs on Friday, and that if we could get 4 points or more out of those two games, we'd be doing very well, and it'd be a good way to round off the first series of matches. So to keep a clean sheet, only the second one of the season so far, which is something that we've harped on about, uh, was very positive, particularly considering how sort of thrown together parts of our team are looking now due to injury withdrawals, and considering that Pats did live up to the hype somewhat for the first 15, 20 minutes, particularly. They looked outstanding, and we had to sort of bail water off the deck of the boat for a while. So if you had told me after 5, 10 minutes watching the game that we were going to hang on and not concede a goal for the whole match, I would have bitten your hand off. So yeah, I thought the performance, and particularly that we kind of improved as it went. So it wasn't just that we kind of just stuck at it and we were, throwing bodies in front of balls and whatever. I thought like we grew into the game and we finished the stronger team. So there was a lot of positives to take from it. But as we might touch on later, um, it is sort of attached at the hip with this fixture upcoming now, and we really need to make sure that we double down and make it 4 out of 6 rather than 2 or 1.
Yeah, Pats did start well. I think Shells looked a little bit nervy, which it's understandable. You've got even though these guys train with each other every day of the week, you still have to look over your left and right shoulder, and you got sort of a new formation, new bodies there. Um, it was a little bit nervy at the start, I thought, and Pats on another day, really, I think they'd be kicking themselves. They had two or three really good chances to test Connor Cairns. But yeah, it took Michelle's maybe 15 minutes or so to settle. But once it did settle, Nunny, we looked fairly confident and settled for the majority of the game.
Yeah, I thought as you said, like it was sort of hold on to your hats for the first 15 minutes. Pat's obviously, I mean, everybody likes to start games fast, but momentum is a very intangible thing. Sometimes you have it, and then and then sometimes it's gone, and it's hard to get it back. But they certainly were rolling downhill on us for the first 15 minutes or so. Um, Mulroney, who I believe was a very late addition because he wasn't due to start, only for an injury in the warm up to, I think it was Simon Power. That Mulroney started, but he flew out of the traps. He didn't look like someone who had intended on starting on the bench, but um, they got at us early and they got at us often. But it was down the wings, and like shape was important, and the word I've sort of underlined here in my notes, which I think carries through um, the entirety of the game, but particularly at the start where we could have perhaps been a bit ragged, is discipline. You and I spoke here last week, Andy, about what Pats are going to bring to the table. That we were going into this match with our eyes wide open, and that if you give them time on the ball, they will cut through you. They have players on the wide sides who can hurt you, and if you give them free kicks in and around the box, they will either take direct shots that invariably some of them will go in, or they'll deliver balls into the box that will lead to goals. Our free count against was magnificent. Um, the areas in which we fouled or conceded free kicks were not, for the most part, in dangerous areas. So whatever Pats got, whether it was field position, territory, we kept them honest, and we kept them having to probe and prod and poke around and try and find little gaps. And the gaps, to be fair, weren't there. I mean, Connor Kearns saw a couple, one from Forrester notably kind of whiz past his left hand post, but other than when he blammed it off, was it Mason Melia's shins inside the first 90
Oh yeah,
seconds or something. Other than that, that's as close as they got to the goal, really, for me. Um, so it was a super disciplined performance. And like, it's easy to say that, it's easy for me and you here to say, oh, well, don't give free kicks away. But when guys are herring down at you, doing step overs, going on the outside, chopping it again and again and again, very hard not to dangle a leg, or to, just through fatigue, to push someone in the back. And it can be very easy to buy a free kick in the League of Ireland these days. Sometimes. So uh, I was really, really super impressed with the discipline.
it was, to me, it was quite a mature performance, and when you consider that at least possibly four starters were unavailable, and you see the guys coming in, it was impressive to see each of their own taking responsibility for their own role, for their own department. Sorry, Lewis Chapman, mixing names up here. Lewis Temple got great credit over the weekend. He's someone I've seen since he was a young lad. He's a tower of a young man. He was top class. But they're individually, they're like leaders. They don't seem to have to look for someone else to g them up. From what I was watching it on TV like yourself, but Damien seemed as calm as he possibly can be. I know he was doing a bit of dancing on the sideline, but I think overall the team, after that sort of sticky early period, we did grow into it. We looked comfortable, and I was delighted to see Ellis Chapman sort of showing signs that he's settling in. It's a new club to him. He's been in and out a little bit. So there's very positive signs overall. The pitch perhaps played a part. It was a good pitch. And on another day, Ellis possibly could have tested the keeper in the first half. Um, so in terms of any standouts to you, Donny, I know we spoke about it last week, particularly about the midfields. Sort of, we're trying to figure out what's the best formation. No, sorry, what's the best selection. It's a bit of a headache for Duff. Is there any clearer answers after Friday night in terms of what may be his first choice? JJ Lunny, I'll just throw him in there at another storming performance for me.
Yeah, I think you could argue that it's more muddy than ever, but
Mm.
sort of for positive reasons rather than negative, because now you've got, if it depends who's returning. And I was kind of, I knew it, but to have it put in such a way as Duff did after the game, when he went through like a back four, he said, we've Sean Gannon out right back. We have Tyreek Wilson hasn't kicked a ball all season left back. We've got Sam Bone and Paddy Barrett out. And I was like, that's three of the back four that started the season, when we were playing fantastic, when we were brilliant against Drogheda, when we were brilliant against Derry, when we looked extraordinarily good against Rovers until Sam Bone went off. That's three quarters of them are gone. Plus, obviously, you'd love to have Tyreek in and around things. I saw him in the sort of behind the scenes video that they released, which was very good. Um, that he was stripped, as were all of the players aforementioned there. But I mean, they can walk around without boots or crutches. That doesn't mean they're necessarily ready to rock. But you mentioned Lewis Temple. Incredible that he's still 19 years old. Like, I've been writing up the player profiles recently for the website. They should be live this week, I'd imagine, between the men's and the women's. And just digging into him a little bit. I know he was on loan last year at Wexford. He was very unlucky not to make an FAI Cup final. To be honest, um, they had Drogheda, Wexford had Drogheda away, and I think they took the lead twice in that match. They were right in it until the end. I think they lost 3-2 to the eventual winners of the cup, obviously. Um, so even to make a final for a kid, who would have been 18 last year, would have been incredible. He was on loan the year before at Longford. So like to think that he's had these two sort of season long loan spells effectively, um, and he's coming back in for us for like the second time because he deputised a bit last year at the start when Shane Griffin was injured, and he's still 19 is crazy. But like that, he showed a level of maturity, and now like if Paddy Barrett were fit, if Sam Bone were fit, um, would he have any right to push Lewis Temple out right now? You could make an argument that he wouldn't. Either of them, I mean. Mark Coyle, again, we spoke last week. I mentioned about the potential reclassification of Mark Coyle based on Friday's evidence. And you know me, Andy, as a man of science, we have to go off the evidence. That's kind of what we're looking at. I haven't heard one person say a bad word about Marco's performance outside of the dive in the other box, which we can gloss over. I think let's just
Yeah.
chalk that one down to, I don't know, rush of blood to the head. But other than that, and to be actually, if you want to bring that back around, to have that yellow card reasonably early and to be in a position where you're going to come under pressure, and you're playing in this new position. He really did exceptionally well as well. There's nobody in the back five who would get any criticism at all from me. I thought they were all stuck to their task and discipline. The whole match. It was brilliant. Um, Nobody really had a poor game. If you want to go through it, like I agree. I think Ellis Chapman gave his best performance in the Shelbourne shirt. Um, his position is a little mercurial, I think, in the sense of like, what are we expecting from him, and like in general terms, I would have been extremely high on his potential when he arrived. When I heard that we had signed him, I made the cardinal error of getting giddy about a new signing, which I told myself I would not do anymore as a grown man. But I had my fingers burned. I think the last player I remember getting excited about was when we signed Yo-Yo Maddie.
Uh,
I thought that was the missing piece, and Yo-Yo's a lovely fella, but it just didn't work. And again, that was because he had the name, but like I was saying this to someone the other day, like you can get excited about the Chapmans and the Yo-Yos of previous times, whatever, but it's the likes of Kerr McEnroy who come in the side door when you're not paying attention, and can be your 8 out of 10 every week, or can be your superstar that you didn't see coming. So like, um, but we had the evidence of last year and an amazing season that Ellis Chapman put in. A real highlights package of a League of Ireland season last year with Sligo. So we did have evidence to base it on, and we've spoken about his curtailed preseason and lack of sharpness, maybe because of that. Duff is, and I think this is crucial, is obviously placing a lot of faith in him, because Duff now, again, even though after his cameo in Sligo and his starts elsewhere, maybe against Galway or whatnot, I don't think the sum of the parts that he showed would merit a start in this team. If you consider, say, even what John O'Sullivan, now I know it's not apples to apples comparison, but what John O'Sullivan put in off the bench, say, in Sligo, for me, far eclipsed what Chapman did, by measures. Whereas, so different roles, okay, but there's people like Ryan O'Kane, there's people like Ray Tulloch, who's like a ghost around the place these days, who might have thought, well, look, how Chapman doesn't deserve another start. He got a start in a big game live on TV, and we're maybe on the counters and on the transitions and on the attempts at goal, you start to see, okay, maybe this is the role for him now. I agree. I thought JJ was very good. I thought JJ, if we're going to redeploy Mark Coyle at centre back, we're going to need a sort of an axis in the middle, reminiscent of Coyle and JJ. So if it can be JJ and Kerr as that sort of defensively minded possession based axis, and you can have one more sort of player with a further intention of going forward, the sort of flair, the added flair player. Maybe Chapman is the guy. He definitely broke with intent on Friday. Um, Arguable shot selection issues from here and there, but that might be nitpicking a little bit. The the places where I was a bit more disappointed in him and was getting a bit frustrated with was, despite the fact that he's a very tall individual, a little lacked a little, I thought, in physicality and trying to hold on to the ball. And there were times when we were breaking, and something could have happened, but the defender kind of got around the side, or he was shucked off the ball a little too easy for me at times. But when he turned and faced the Pats goal,
Yeah,
it kind of came alive then, and he was linking up to play quite nicely. So, um, it's good to see, and like he probably needed that. Let's be, he's only human. He probably needed that for his confidence. So I think we'll probably see more of it. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he starts on Friday. Um, Obviously, Harry Wood was kind of back to the Harry Wood of earlier in the season. I think he's been pretty good every game, but I thought he looked very, very lively. A few people, we might touch on it later, were on to me just privately about why did he get hooked, and that we might have lost a bit of our sort of attacking flair and impetus and so on without him. Um, but the only sort of sour note, really, I suppose, on it all was John Martin. Everybody was so chuffed for him after last week, his goal, but his overall performance, I thought his attitude was spot on, and it was nice to see an honest guy get an honest break. To be honest, to be honest, sorry, I'm overusing the word now. To be frank, but um, karma or whatever the tossings and turnings of the universe, it rolled for him last week, and it did not roll for him this week. I hope the muscular injury, whether it's a quad or a hamstring, I'm unsure, but I hope it's just a niggle and not something more nefarious, because if muscular injuries can be as long as you want, we never know. But the fact that he played on, I thought was not great. He felt it, he went down, and then he played on. It was he who obviously made that call, but that's probably done more damage. Whatever the initial tweak was,
yeah,
we saw Sam Bone go down with a little tweak like that, and we thought maybe he'd be back because he immediately sat down, knew his own body or whatever, and we haven't seen him yet. It'd be a tragedy if John Martin was gone for as long as that. So we can maybe discuss Meepo, and his kind of um, hot and cold performance, if you like, a bit further down
yeah.
the line.
Thanks,
What did you
Sonny.
think of
Yeah,
that?
we've a lot to get through there. We've had a busy mailbag this week. We'll get to it in just a moment. Harry Wood and Meepo were very much involved in terms of the questions there. As you said, John Martin is very unfortunate. The only sort of silver lining for the club is that Sean Boyd should be back available this Friday. But second half we started much better, Dunny. I think everyone will admit that we sort of took it to Pats, and I thought Pats sort of they sort of lost their way, which was a credit to the Shells boys. The big thing, as you said, Dunny, is when we get these chances, we just have to be more clinical. Um, that's what can decide these big games. I know Meepo had one or two goals. Ellis Chapman had a good strike, good save. I'm just picking out other ones here. Then I think very close to the end, Ali Coote. Um, I think he thought he was defending a corner because he put it out so far. But things like this, it was essentially a free header from about 6-7 yards, and he made a dog's dinner of it. Look, anyway, these things happen. You were hoping someone else would be there, but it wasn't to be. So the chances again, Shells are creating chances now. As you said, a clean sheet. I'll take a clean sheet every week. I'd love it. I'm a old school defender. I'd be going home punching the high fives after a clean sheet. But in these big games, like as we saw last year, particularly against Pats, very very small margins between the top two. So Fingers crossed, we'll see things progressing. Um, so I'll tell you what, Tony. While we're on the subject, we'll I'll fire a couple of questions at you regarding the busy mailbox this week.
Sure.
Um, let's start with, we sort of touched on this one. This one's from Shane Kennedy. I put up a tweet the other day saying, was this a back to basics, hard fought, sort of that hard battling game? And what I meant by that is that Shell's back to basics was that we're back to, working our socks off, keeping things very tight, doing the scrappy stuff, and staying in the game, which thankfully that we did, but that sort of was the first 15 minutes or so when we easily could have given a goal away. But Shane, thanks for coming in with your message, Shane. He said, back to basics is far from what it was. We defended our box at times, but we played through the lines and created the best chances in the game. Dominated the second half for large spells. If only we played on a pitch like that every week. Donny.
Yeah. I understand. Yeah, I understand that I think the tone of your initial remark. I understand what was meant there, but yeah, everything that Shane says is also accurate. I would say. I'm not going to remark on the pitch because I've already blown a gasket talking in a previous pod about how Pats don't have to worry about having
Correct.
a women's team playing on their pitch, so
Yeah.
they can get the manscaped gear out and uh, and do that all week long,
Yeah.
um, without fear of having to play two senior matches on it in a week. So that's a separate thing, and like ultimately, um, we've spoken about pitches for long enough. We're hoping now it's a lovely sunny day out there today on this Monday evening, and it might lead to better pitches. It should do at some point. So the other issues, playing through the lines, we did that. I thought Chapman helped. Wood, I thought was good at that. Obviously, Lunny as well. We did. I mean, but the thing is to get those chances and to play through the lines. We did that when we broke, and you don't break unless a team is having a go at you. So we've had other games we've struggled in and our only defeat of the season, for example, against Strahdo, when for large parts they had no interest in attacking us, and we had to try and figure it out for ourselves. So um, here you had a team that absolutely, I'd say more than anybody this season. Maybe there was a period in that Shamrock Rovers match in Tolka where they kind of came through the middle a bit cavalier like, but I don't remember the sort of ferocity of pace and the sort of driving purpose that say Mulroney and others showed in that first 15-20 minutes. This was the most put to the pin of our collar I think we've been all season, which then on the turnover allowed Chapman, who stayed high, to sort of turn, and when he got facing the goal, to create chances. We were down at about 30% possession at half time, according to the stats. And by the end of the game, it was basically even. It was 51-49. So that means that we obviously we flipped the tables on them second half. Shots 17-10 in favour of Pats. Big chances down as 1v2. So us creating two big chances, Pats only the one. The problem is, like, and you mentioned it yourself, that if that Forrester chance goes in, if that one goes off Melia's right shin pad or whatever and goes in, that could be the game. You know, um, equally, if post Ramadan Meepo slaps that one into the bottom left corner, then we have a totally different narrative in our hands. You know what I mean? So on those, I think most people would say a draw was a fair result. They were better in the first half. We were better in the second. Let's call it a fair draw. But as you said, those fine margins of whoever took that chance, whether it be Ali Cood and his old 50 pence head, or whether it was Meepo with his shot from outside the edge of the area, they go in. It's a different game, and you go home, and it's an app. That would be. I think if either of those go in, we're talking back to Caffrey's goal last year and equal scenes, and the flag planted in the ground, and big statement made for the season. So um, I'm not upset. I'm not disappointed that we didn't do that, but a very very finely balanced game, and frankly, watching bizarre, at home, I wouldn't recommend it, but it was a very good spectacle, and you could one of those games you could kind of tell that for someone who was maybe just tuning in, they would have watched it to the end. It had drama, it had sort of ebbs and flows, and it was a very good game.
Agreed, Donny. Thank you. Another one here from Shells on this day. Best I've seen Harry Wood play since returning. He was superb in the second half, but was surprised he was taken off. We've had a couple of similar queries on that. Harry was impressive. I would say first half, like the majority of the team, he was probably a little bit more subdued, but he definitely grew into it in the second half. Was that a tactical change, Dunny, do you think, or fitness? Because it seems to have left a lot of people scratching their heads.
Yeah, I had Tyke Brennan was on to me with similar thrust of an argument, saying that that's probably maybe a couple of times now this season where Wood has been taken off while looking pretty potent, and one of our more creative outlets. Obviously, apart from the John Martin change, which had to be made in the first half, we only made two. Um, Wood came off in the 73rd, and Chapman came off on 90 minutes for John O'Sullivan. 73 minutes. I mean, that just those two subs alone sort of showed tell you a bit of the story of the game, and that we did go for it. There was no case of shutting up shop and dropping anybody's back or whatever. I agree that Wood looked really lively. You see, I still think we're kind of there's a little bit of structural accommodation that's happening for Chapman, and I don't think Wood is being given the same latitudes. I think Wood is he's making the accommodations for us rather than the other way around. Um, I don't think he's a left winger, but he's kind of like a number 10 playing off the left. And when he's on the ball, he can just make things happen. He's, when he's sort of feeling himself. And there were times then, as the second half was continuing, where he was finding space. He was involved in 1-2s. He was nutmegging players. I just he was, I think he had one shot. He kind of like I'd love him to have a few more. Um, so he was kind of cooking, to be honest. And I certainly thought there were other players on the field who could have been hooked for maybe Ali Coote. Like, why would you have to take Wood off for Coote? I think you could have taken Chapman off and put Coote on if you wanted to. Um, Chapman ultimately made way anyway for John O'Sullivan. It's not that Coote was a defensive switch, and ultimately, look, he popped up with the freedom of the box. If that goes in, inspired substitution, right? But I'd say an element of that is Harry is probably, wide players in general maybe fall foul of being hooked early just because managers are like, shake it up. Plus, you've got wide players sitting on the bench saying, well, am I going to get on? It's 0-0. There's no goals. We've seen coming up 75 minutes of this stuff. There's only just basically 15 and a bit of change to go. And then you've got your Tullocks, O'Kane's, Coote, Kelly, I don't think was in the squad again. But we have these wide players who are going to be saying, well, am I going to get a fair shot here? And Ali hasn't had a bad season by any manner of means. So I'm kind of in agreement. It's a bit of an easy out maybe to take Harry off. I'd like to think maybe if we were in a similar position come Friday, he might be given a bit of grace, because I think he might be entitled to some at this point.
We have it's the beauty of football, Donny, is that you line 10 people up to watch the same game, and you're going to get 7, 8, 9, 10 different opinions. Um, Other questions on Wood? You've touched on this. If Wood had stayed on, would we have won the game? Surprised he didn't take off Chapman. Is it a fitness issue? And then we have another one here, Dunny. Someone's putting the boot in. This is a 2-footed one on you, Dunny. Ellis Chapman has not been as bad as Dunny has suggested. That's I don't know. I don't recall you giving Ellis Chapman a 2-footed lunge at all. But our listeners are putting the boot in there, Dunny.
Interesting. Okay. I'll take your criticism on board, anonymous listener.
Anonymous
Um,
listener.
no, but look, I think largely speaking, this has been a good start to the season overall. And if it's our kind of job as fans to sift through the ashes of each performance and kind of come up with what are the trends, what are the stories going forward. And as I said, if only, like, I'll go back to it. Nobody saw Kerr McInroy coming, and you know people want to have his babies, and I'll sign up for a bit of that myself. So, but whereas Chapman is coming in with a reputation
Yep.
and an expectation, and and then is hampered straight away with the preseason thing we've discussed. So he's kind of starting with a lower battery maybe than others, but the expectation is still high, and you can't. As a supporter, it's very hard to remove that. To kind of to see it just in the reality and say, well, maybe he's a month or two behind everybody else, and but when you see him on the pitch, you're like, well, if he's good enough to be out there, then he's good enough to give me what I saw last season in a Sligo shirt, and we haven't seen it. I think it's interesting that Damien Duff is obviously deliberately, it looks to me, um, putting more faith in him and being like, I'm going to give him the opportunities, and I'm not going to, if he has a 5 out of 10 game, I'm not going to suddenly just put him back on the bench and keep him for a rainy day. I think he sees the upside of Chapman and is going to try and blood him through matches. We struggled, both spells that Harry would have had at the club. Initially, his first couple of games, he was way off the pace. And obviously, when and then he got up to it, and he was one of the players of the season for us. We couldn't have gotten Europe without him. And then he returns, and we're all, you know, celebrating like mad. Great to have him back. And then we were very, by come the end of the season, prior to that goal, you would have said, okay, he's kind of disappointed a little bit, and we've heard the reason since for that. So, like, I don't recall going all in on him, but I would say, because of my high expectation, I don't think it's unfair to say that he hasn't delivered on it yet.
Yep.
Friday we saw a bit more of the Chapman that we remember from last season, and he's had even against Galway and stuff. He's had these snapshots and whatever. I think you could be one of those going in off the post or off the underside of the bar, away from, okay, now the touch paper has been lit and he's off and he's feeling himself, and the fitness will kind of mesh with that, and we have a serious player on our hands again. Hopefully just in time for the second round of fixtures, Europe to come, and so on. So happy to see it. And yeah, if Friday was the baseline for Ellis Chapman performances going forward, I think we're in a good place.
Yeah, I don't recall you being too overly harsh on him, Dunny. So I'll back you up there. I think we're lucky to have him. I think he's a very special talent, and I hope he plays on Friday against Bohs. I think he could have a big say in that game. There's one thing that was interesting, Dunny, is that three of our central midfielders are all left footers. Ellis Chapman, JJ, and I think JJ is, correct me if I'm wrong,
Mm.
and McInroy. Now, normally, if they were three right-footed players, you wouldn't even think, you just sort of accept it. But I thought it was just a little unusual, and it sort of showed itself, particularly when Chapman was attacking. He was very eager to switch back onto his left side, which is understandable. But you'd like sometimes to see fellas just having a go, even if it's on their weaker side when the shot's there to be taken. Just before we move on, Dunny, we'll just wrap up here. Quick one from Alan Fraser. You mentioned this man's name. Where is Dan Kelly?
SOS. Ooh, I mean, as far as I'm aware, he's injured. I didn't see him in that video that I watched today. That's not to say he mightn't be in it, but I did see Tyreek. I did see um, Sam Bone. I did see Paddy Barrett. I did see our sub goalkeeper um, and others, but I didn't see Dan Kelly. I'm not sure. I hope it's nothing sinister. I mean, this happens every year. There often are players. It's the nature of the game. I suppose you have 20 plus grown men in the building, and one or two people are going to have their noses out of joint, or might be working on a different regimen to others. Um, we kind of had it with Keith Ward last year, and you'd say the same maybe for uh, Dean Williams. Um, what I would say is Dan Kelly is a better footballer than both of those in 2025. So I would be in no rush to write anybody off and say they shouldn't. If they're not here now, then they won't be needed, or whatever. And this is something I think, as an overall point, is something worth kind of dwelling on a little bit. Is that there are players who started and who were fantastic on Friday. We spoke about Temple. Um, we spoke about Mark Coyle in his sort of new role. We've seen John Martin have a flash of what he could offer were he to stay fit. Um, and I was very impressed with John O'Sullivan last week. He got, albeit limited, time again on Friday. You really just have to be there and plug away. The season is long. 36 league games, hopefully a run in the FAI Cup, guaranteed minimum 4 European matches as well. So you're talking 40 plus games guaranteed. And we've played 8. So, depending on where you're coming from, there is a chance for absolutely everybody. So I don't know what Dan Kelly's situation is. All I know is he was injury prone in Derry. He came to us with an injury. He wasn't the only one, far from it. He was kind of, to my knowledge, he got some minutes in pre-season. He may have gotten a few minutes in between the President's Cup and maybe the first game or so of the season off the bench. I'm not certain on that, but certainly he hasn't been seen for a long time. And there's an element of what's that phrase? The best. Oh, I'm gonna forget it now. The best ability is availability. That's one I like. The best ability is availability, and that's showing up for if you're there. And I think this is fair. We don't have a massively bloated squad, far from it. If people keep showing up and they're honest in their efforts, they'll get a chance. So I don't think the door is closed on Dan Kelly. I haven't heard any rumors. Genuinely, now, if I'd heard a little bit of backbiting or that something had happened up in the AUL or whatever, I might allude to it, but I genuinely haven't heard anything. If there's been an issue, it's been kept incredibly quiet. And normally, with the way things are, with phones and so on, and everybody knowing someone with the 6 degrees of separation, League of Ireland wise, I'm sure something would have come out. So I assume it's not nefarious and it's just an injury that's maybe more serious than initially thought. And I hope genuinely that he and O'Kane and Tulloch and O'Sullivan and Tyreek, who hasn't kicked the ball for us, can all come back and play a part, because it took an entire squad of players last season to get us over the line with 6 minutes left in the entire season. It took Sam Bone coming over from Maidstone to score in Gibraltar in what some people will say is their favorite ever Shells game. And so, these everybody, if your head is right and if you can be diligent and professional about it, will have a role to play. So it is a bit weird not seeing him around. But there's also people who are not injured, who you're not seeing a lot of, and probably where my focus would be more immediately drawn is to those. Is what's the story with Ray Tulloch, who we've seen do brilliant things, and he's not being trusted. in a game where we made two tactical substitutions, we could have made more, and we didn't. The likes of he and Ryan O'Kane were not used. Um, so yeah, hopefully it's nothing too sinister, and yeah, plenty of the season to go.
Thanks, Sonny. Hopefully, we do see Dan Kelly sooner rather than later. I think it is just the managing of an ongoing niggling injury, so it's better to get him back when he's ready rather than throwing him in just for the sake of it and then dealing with any repercussions. Just one final one on this, Dunny. I'll merge two questions into one here. One from Gav07. We mentioned this already. One, does Lewis Temple deserve a run in the side? We touched on that. And then second one from Paddy Mackin. Thanks, Paddy. You would have liked to have seen John O'Sullivan get in a bit earlier after last week's performance in Sligo. So we've touched on them, but we now have a squad, Donny. In the past, we may have had a squad of 15, 16 people really battling it out for first, for the top first 11, and then let's say, with respect, you may have had players who are sort of more like fillers to bulk out the squad, another five, six, seven. We now really more or less have two very strong starting 11s available to us. So when you look at the substitute bench, I am wondering, why is Ray Tulloch not hammering down the door to say, play me, Gaffer, play me? Maybe he is. You got Ryan O'Kane, John O'Sullivan, JJ Lunny's been in and out. Like, it's very difficult. And now, as you see, we see Mark Coyle like a new libero slash, I don't know, he's like a bit of a Baresi. He just slots back in there, very comfortable, very calm. Is There's two questions here, Donny. One, I'm getting these the wrong way around. Is Mark Hoyle now a serious contender to stay in that position, or is it just a temporary move? And secondly, um, actually, I'm after losing the run of myself here again. Secondly, the stuff like John O'Sullivan and the other midfielders, is
Yeah.
have we got to that point yet where we know who our sort of first choice guys are going to be, or is that
Oh,
still another half a dozen games off before we really get
yeah.
things bedded down?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts there, but I think, say, I would agree on the John O'Sullivan thing. Um, you like to see honest and application of effort, I should say, rewarded. But I think John O'Sullivan's effort and application will be rewarded should he stay injury free. Just not every game necessarily is the right game. And we won't know, say, that 20 minutes or so or whatever it was he gave in Sligo. He mightn't have that for every match right now. It mightn't be it's which opposition player is he going to be coming up against directly, and so on. So um, I agree in the sentiment, but I understand that the sort of the details is where the devil lies, and maybe they didn't think that the matchup was directly suited for him. I would expect to see more of him, and frankly, it would be fantastic if he could deliver something on Friday coming. Um, with I think you've more of a messy soup of a situation where you to have all your defenders back. I mean, it's unlikely for them all to come back at once, but theoretically, if you had Sam Bone, Paddy Barrett, Sean Gannon, and Tyreek Wilson back tomorrow, and they were fit and available, I don't know how you would turn around and look Lewis Temple in the eye, for example, and say, "Sorry, kid, this is big boy football. You're going to have to grab a bib and take a seat." Particularly as well, could you say that to James Norris? Could you say that to Evan Caffrey? But at the same, but you at some point you're going to have to say it to someone, right? The Mark Coyle issue is doubly murky because then if you say, well, you can't play him a centre back, you weren't really, you know yourself, you're not really a centre back anyway, albeit the great job you're doing. Thanks for that, pal. And your club captain. And now are you saying, well, okay, Gaffer, just put me back in the middle where I'm used to, and then you got to go tell JJ that he's not playing, or you got to tell you, well, you're not dropping Kerr, right? So that's a whole other box of dynamite that you got to go and try and figure out how you're going to do that without it blowing up in your face. So um, this is what we wanted. Uh, when you're sort of adding to your squad and when you're seeing progression like we've seen for the previous 3 seasons to get us to the season 4 under Damien Duff, you wanted a stronger bench, you want a stronger squad. I mean, the injuries we've listed in a previous year would have had us playing some less than stellar players. Let's just put it that way. Um, so it's like I thought it stood to our credit that even we started John Martin, and we lost him within a half, and we brought Meepo on. I mean, I know he's winding some people up at the minute with one thing or other. I think he's just a kind of a mercurial guy. I'd rather see him shoot than not shoot. Um, was it Michael Jordan who said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, or I believe it was him or someone else in the NBA. But that kind of idea. So I'd rather have him take all the shots than be scared to pull the trigger. I know there's probably a happy medium, but he doesn't seem like a kind of a guy who lives life on medium. But the depth is there. Boyd suspended, Martin injured, and instead of being like, does anyone have Daniel Automobile's phone number? We give him a call. You've got a top quality player coming in, who's more than capable of leading the line for most teams in the league. So, um, again, I think people are just going to have to be patient and realize that it's a long season and that we're all in this together. And you would hope, though, that's why I liked last week with John O'Sullivan tapping the badge and beating his chest. I was like, well, there's a guy with his priorities straight. There's a guy who realizes that he's won the league last year on the basis of not throwing his toys out of the pram, on the basis of unity of effort of the entire team pitching in together over 36 league games. And they got their rewards. It wasn't me, it was us. And I don't, we have some new players. And it was funny to hear Duff mention that he said it to Coyle and other people after the game. Maybe we've got our team back. He was
Yes.
looking for that unity within the group, and maybe through the adversity of having so many senior guys unavailable and taking further knocks with John Martin and so on, that he's like, okay, well, we're galvanized now going forward, and hopefully they can really um, tap into that, because that's what we need. There will be difficult conversations. There will be players who will have to man up and take a seat and trust the manager that they'll get the call when the time is right. So I wouldn't envy him, but people are going to have to be bigger than their own egos, I think.
Yeah, that's why they're professionals. They have to follow their leader, and a long season ahead. Donny, we've been rabbiting on about the game now for some time. Just before we move on to our game this Friday, we saw the issue again with ticketing issues last week with the tickets for the St.Pats game. Now we know this was raised by fans for must be 2 or 3 years now. It was raised again at the fans forum a few weeks ago. Neil Doyle is aware of it from the club side of things. It can't keep rumbling on like this, can it? I don't know where the blame is. I'll be generous and say it's not Shelburne this time, but I'm not a techie fella, but surely either the clubs have to come together now with the authorities and either put it out to tender for a ticketing provider for one system just to try and get this resolved. I think in the EFL in the UK, in England, they have one provider across all teams. I think they also have one. I could be wrong now, but when I last checked a year or two ago, they had one website provider. So each team has a fairly similar looking website, and you have your own. Of course, you have your own shop, you have your own details, but the format is clear. Everyone, it just makes things much more user friendly. Now, You and I weren't lucky enough to get our hands on tickets for St. Pat's, but asking people to stand by their phones or their laptops at 7 p.m. to go for tickets that are like rare as hen's teeth, and then you get sucker punched by tech issues. We won't go on about it too much, but it has popped its head up again this week. Any, you're the man with the answers, Donny. So that's why we have you here. Any thoughts on it?
I'll figure it out now, lad. Just don't worry. Give me 2 minutes. Um, you've taken some of my overarching points there. We haven't discussed this off air, Andy, but I'm in full agreement about putting it out to tender, and I'm in full agreement with the EFL having basically the nearest functional template that I've seen. Um, when you started uh, this point by saying it can't surely rumble on this long, I immediately saw that Mick McCarthy meme where, surely this can't rumble on any longer. It can.
Yeah,
Yeah, it can. It can, and
it probably will.
it probably almost certainly will. I'd be shocked if it doesn't. I think we'll be here again next year, frankly. I hope we're not. I hope I'm wrong. But it's certainly here till the end of the season. So we're going to have to deal with it twice for Bohs and once again for Pats. Um, they really are the two ticketing pinch points, if you like. Um, Pats now because they've half their allocation, and Bohs because they've effectively half their allocation as well when we moved from the Des Kelly to the mono stand. The only way to fix it is to put a unity behind it and say, if you want to come in and be a ticketing provider in the League of Ireland, make us your pitch. We'll go with the best one. And the FAI and the League of Ireland, as one, have to be neutral in choosing what they think on the metrics of people's presentations of interest. Um, choose the best one and go with that, because right now, as far as I'm aware, we have half the league with various different ticket providers, half the Premier Division, I should say, and the other half are with future ticketing. Now, we're obviously with future ticketing. One of our major shareholders, Mickey O'Rourke, is part owner of future ticketing. So I don't know how he would feel, if he would feel it would be untenable or a conflict of interest, for example, if we were forced to go with, say, Ticketmaster or something else. I don't know. But it sounds reasonably straightforward to say, as of the end of the 2025 season, for the 2026 season, the FEI will be accepting declarations of interest from ticketing providers for 2026 and beyond. Boom, go. Where's your sticking point? Well, the one that I can think of straight off the bat is the FEI Cup final. The international tickets, to the best of my knowledge, through the FAI are done by Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster also get the revenue and access explicitly, exclusively to the FAI Cup final, the biggest show in town, ticket revenue wise, 30,000 plus every year. Future ticketing, I know, are salty about that, and I wouldn't necessarily blame them, because they're, hitherto anyway, are the ones that seem to be making more efforts to get the league recognised and to sort of give their time to the league, whereas Ticketmaster don't seem to care very much about the league until it's the the succulent end of season fruit that gets all the eyeballs and all the neutrals going out to watch the game. So the FAI would have to grow a pair of testicles and speak to Ticketmaster and say, you have to be either in for all of the season with all of the teams, all of the clubs, to get access to do the FAI Cup final. Or if someone comes in with a better offer, you can still do the international tickets, but you can't do the FAI Cup final. I don't see them having the testicular fortitude to put it up to anybody, let alone a giant company like Ticketmaster. So I think that's a huge sticking point there, unless Ticketmaster were so inclined to come in and do the league as well, which might help, which might work. You're dead right about the EFL. Um, that's 72 football clubs. If you get promoted from the National League to League Two, it's in the sort of the the paperwork that you sign to take part. You know, if you come up, let's say, let's say you're Forest Green Rovers, who have kind of bounced up and down between, they've gone as high as League One and now they're back in the National League. They can this season in the National League have whoever they like selling tickets on their behalf. Next, if they go up, whether it's through the playoffs or automatically, they are bound by the rules of engagement that they have to use this platform, and they have to have, as you said, the websites are uniform, the ticket provider is uniform, the deal has already been struck. It's not up to you. You can't just pick and choose whoever you like. Um, and that's Monopoly. I don't often like, but in the case of this, it'd be like if you went, when you go down to Turner's Cross, they play with Umbro footballs, and then you go to Phibsborough and they've got Mitre footballs, and then Shells have a deal with Nike and we use Nike football. Like, that just doesn't happen in the modern game. So uh, I think we need to get real, and this needs, we can have a beer, uh, uh, um, one brand of beer promoted across all the clubs. Why can't we have one ticket provider across all the clubs? I have been led to believe as well that the future ticketing had been less than uh, flawless when it came to things. And personally, we all have lives outside of Shells, and I put one night aside to try, and I was training from hour X to Y so that I could go and try and book a ticket. The thing failed. I couldn't get a ticket. And then the next night, or when it was refixed, I was training different hours because it went on half the hour rather than on the hour. I was in the middle of a training session and I couldn't get it. So I was like, well, look, I'm not going to bend over backwards to pay over the odds for what I believe was an absolutely terrible view, and not a very enjoyable experience. So you're kind of treated like shit
Yeah.
on the way in, and you're treated like shit on the way out when it comes to St.Pats away anyway, because the process of getting a ticket is nightmarish, and being at the match, I believe wasn't too great either. So yeah, I do hope for next season that someone, whether it's Ticketmaster or whether it's Future Ticketing, just puts an offer on the table that's almost too good to refuse, and someone has the courage to push it through.
Thanks, Tony. Very thorough there. Yeah, I think it's going to rumble on, unfortunately. And paying for the privilege of standing in Richmond Park having bottles of piss thrown at you. It's not everyone's idea of an ideal Friday night. So, Donny, I'll let you go. You've been rambling on there and doing all the hard work and heavy lifting for the last hour or so. So, just before we move on to Bohs, I just want to thank everyone again for listening to the shows. We've had really fantastic listener numbers. You can get in touch with us across all the media pages, and then with all the show notes, we'll have the contact details. You may have noticed we have a new logo for the show. Big thank you to Dara McAvoy for doing that. Dara, you won't be getting paid, but you've got your shout out, so thank you very much. And also had a message, Dunny. I know you're a big online gamer. Maybe you were in the old days, back in the Commodore 64 with me. But Shells had the ELOI title has been won for Shells by a chap called JP Slater. So JP's cousin Jack Corrigan was in touch to send his congratulations to him. So well done on that.
We win trophies. That's what we do.
Well, that's two in the bag now. That's three in the bag now. Two President's Cup and the ELOI title. So that's what it's all about. It's all about silverware. So Dunny, we covered a lot there with Pat. So thanks for sticking with us on this one. So we moved from Pat's last Friday again to our small matter of our friends from up the road. Bohemians are in Tolka this Friday night. This could be a juicy one. No love lost, of course. Was the fact that Bohs won last week in a sort of a scrappy win over Sligo. Is that good news for us? Because it's sort of status quo for them. They haven't made any managerial changes, and my from my people on the street up in Phibsborough, there's the natives are still restless.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that certainly the narrative there was, you don't want them to. There was people saying, "Oh, I hope they win against Sligo, so that Reynolds is still in charge when he comes to Tolka." Um, and it does feel inevitable that at some point or other, um, that Alan Reynolds won't be their manager anymore. Certainly, and I mean in the short term rather than the medium term. However, um, he does have a pretty reasonable record against us, and generally form. And I know you can say it about derbies, and sometimes it's just clutching at clutching at phrases. But in this case with Bows, it has in the last couple of years anyway seemed to not matter a huge amount where one team or the other were in the table at time of playing. So I'm not, if it was Derek Pender in the dugout because they were looking for somebody else, him having been sacked, do I think they'd rock up to Talca and not try a leg and just be an absolute rabble any more than they've been already this season? No. We saw on the opening weekend they were able to match Shamrock Rovers on a pitch that everybody assumed Shamrock Rovers would sort of inherently have an advantage on, and limited Rovers to very little. So I know they've been largely cold rather than hot since then. They did have a very heavy win down in Waterford, and they scored 4 on Friday. So like when it clicks, it can click for them. And sometimes we've been our own worst enemy when it comes to fixtures like this. I Some part of me is still not over the 2-1 loss to them last year at our place when we had all of the wind in our sails. Um, and it really should have been, and it kind of felt for the first time in years for me that we were turning up to do them, and we got done. But we kind of played ourselves really that night. Silly errors, and we couldn't get back in the game. And actually, speaking of last year, I made a couple of notes just on where we were last year versus where we are now. So obviously this Friday coming we'll have played everybody in the league. The first round of games will have concluded. After 8 games last year, so we've 8 played now. After 8 games last year, we had 18 points. After 8 games this year, we're on 13, so we're 5 less. We were unbeaten last year. We've lost 1 this year, which isn't bad, but we've only won 3,
Yeah.
and we're going into our 9th game. So 4 wins out of 9 is a lot better than 3 wins out of 9. So we can amass 16. If we win Friday, we'll have 16 points. We had 21 at the end of the first round last year. That's when we beat Drogheda in the 9th fixture last year. So just for a bit of comparison, I thought that I found that helpful just to sort of take a look in sort of wide vision there on where we were and where we are. Now, of course, we dropped off massively in later rounds, so we needed that kind of buffer as things sort of proceeded on throughout the year. But if we were to get to 16, which is 5 off a league winning season and a season in which that early buffer was, as I said, so vital, I think we're in a good spot. If we don't, it's a bit, it really 3 points is really, really important, I think, Friday, which puts a bit more pressure on us than I'd like. And it's certainly more pressure on us than them. They would be delighted to rock up to our place and come away with a draw, any kind of result at all. So we're not going to have the same gaps on display for the counter-attacking stuff that we saw on Friday in Richmond Park. So we're going to have to take the Allen key out, or the Swiss Army knife, or whatever implement we're looking for in the toolbox, and just find out, maybe ultimately it might be the sledgehammer uh, to pick the lock or to knock the door down to get past them, because I'm not sure they'll be super ambitious coming to Talca. and we're going to have to deal with that. But by hook or by crook, I think we need 3 points. There's no two ways about it.
I would say for any Reds out there is not to be fooled by the poor start from Bohs. For all their issues, they're if they were to win on Friday, they'd be 1 point behind us, which shows how close things are. You haven't got over the 2-1 defeat last year to Dundee. I still haven't got over the 1-0 defeat a few weeks ago to Drogheda or the 1-all against Cork. They really sort of they're just something that really irks me about that. So we have to get back to winning ways at home. I think it's whatever we have to do, whatever it needs be. If it goes in off Paddy Barrett's arse in the 98th minute, that's fine. I'll take that. Points like the point away to Pats will only be good points if we can follow up with a home win. And I'm encouraged by the words from Duff where he says he feels he's got that feeling back in the team. The team are after a rough patch. He thinks that we're sort of finding ourselves. Alan Reynolds, as you said, despite his there's no love lost, it seems, between him and the fans up in Bohemians, but he is able to get a tune out of that team every now and again. He has made life difficult for us um, last year, particularly when he came in with Bohemians. Is it a case that we're going to have to be the ones now to force the issue, and they'll be, the tables have turned. We're the ones now, whereas in the past we'd be sort of sitting back, keep things contained, and go for a 1-0, 2-1. We
Yeah.
saw against Cork and we saw against Drogheda that we sort of struggled to be that team on the front foot. Have we learned anything since those games?
Well, I hope so. We've lost players since those games, so the deck will be shuffled. It won't be the 11 that was drawing against Drogheda, nor the 11 that or sorry, lost to Drogheda, nor the 11 that drew at Cork. I hope we've learned some lessons. I certainly hope we won't forfeit a half of football in the manner that we did against Cork in a derby. But like the more we kind of tease this out, Annie, and I agree with you 100% on what you're saying regarding points on the road like Friday in Richmond Park only really become the kind of currency that we need when you add to that the home results that we're looking for. Um, and so far, our away performances, our away results have been better than our home. From a very good start, we've put in a couple of lackluster ones more recently. No better time. I mean, and this is the thing. This is the measure of the men. You've got to step up and say, okay, well, it's a sellout. We sold out almost 2 weeks prior to the fixture, which is almost unheard of. It's going to be hostile. They're going to have nigh on 1,000 fans in the away end. The place is going to be on wheels, and expect the burden of expectation is on you. So what are you going to do? So it really is. I mean, I have absolutely every faith that we can beat them. Um, but as you say, it's not going to be a case of just showing up, and it's going to be a case of having to figure them out. Going to have to match them for output of effort first and foremost. They have some very good players, like Dawson Devoy is a very good player, and they have Connor Parsons in fits and starts has shown himself to be a very good player. Colin Whelan, although is capable of missing a chance, there was rumours that he was coming to us from Derry rather than Bohs that I'd heard about midway through last season, and despite the injury issues, I absolutely would have taken a punt on Colin Whelan. Um,
Yeah, I'm a
and
big fan.
yeah, when he's on, he's on. I mean, we mentioned Yo-Yo earlier. That's part of the reason Yo-Yo ended up with 15 goals in 18 games or something, because he was playing alongside with Colin Whelan that season. Um, so, uh, so I mean, we can't sleep on them. But I think we'll win, and if let's just go for it and put our neck out there. Um, I think 2-1 home win.
Really will take that. So yeah, that will bring us to the end of round one, Donny. I think we'll hopefully next week or the week after we'll do a recap of the first round of games. We're heading into a busy Easter. There's, I think it's Drogs away Good Friday, and then I think we're home on the Monday to Galway. I just need to double check that. So the games are coming thick and fast. Just before we wrap up, Dunny, international weekend, of course, for the women's national team. Alex Kavanagh got called up, which is great for Alex. Great servant to the club, of course. Still only 24, 25. She joins Avian Clancy as Shell's representatives. They play Greece in their second game tomorrow. On the Shell's point of view, they're back in action this Saturday against Bohemians again in Dalymount Park. I think it's a 7:30 kickoff. If the weather's nice and people have nothing else to do, I would really encourage you to try and get along to support the Reds. We'll do a full review of this one next week, Dunny. But should we expect another Reds win? There's a lot of old faces up there in Dalymount from Shell squads of the past. So it could be a little bit of edge to this one.
Yeah, you'd hope so. Regarding the edge, and obviously you'd hope so regarding the result as well. Yeah, I'd say if any Reds are around and uh, not even if you have nothing else to do, I'd say try and get whatever it is you've got to do out the way first, and then go and watch the team. We spoke last week about how the women's Premier Division can be a real ground for spotting talent that will eventually go on to play for Ireland. And it's great now that we've doubled our allocation of Irish internationals in the current team, as you say, with Evie Clancy being backed up now with Alex Kavanagh is fantastic. I hope some of them, particularly even as she travelled to Greece, uh, and they had a good 4-0 win. That tomorrow night, now on Tuesday, if you're listening to this on Tuesday morning, um, but on Tuesday in Tala, that at least one of the two of them might get a run. It was great to see, obviously, Jessie Stapleton do so well. A recent former Red and someone who absolutely has Shelburne in her heart and in her DNA. But um, you feel that the tie, or the Greece are there to be got. They're not as good as I sort of expected them to be. To be honest, I didn't realize we'd rolled them that easy. So to have them again, you'd sort of assume that we might be able to put it to bed relatively early, and it might give the opportunity for Carla Ward to give some players who've been in around the squad who didn't maybe get minutes at all or didn't get many minutes, that they might see some game time. So it'd be fantastic to actually have some currently capped players in the new squad, and it would be a great lift for everybody. And I think both girls, regardless of whether they get some minutes or no minutes, should be absolutely rolling into Shell's camp full of confidence, 10 feet tall, um, because it's a real honor and to get asked to represent your country. So I'd expect maybe Alex. It might be good for Alex, who's coming off obviously a period of injury, that she might be able to kind of get some reps in this camp at a very high level that might see her in a good place, actually, kind of sharpness wise, for Bohs away. It's unfortunate Noelle Murray um, will presumably have to sit this one out after her 2 yellow cards. And I think you said it, Andy, on the broadcast, that she won't like to miss that fixture, because obviously there was some unpleasantness up there with their previous management, and I'm sure she'd
Yes.
like to stick it to them again by beating them. But I know without Noel, we've still got some great options. So yeah, I'd be confident of a win there. And sure, if we're going predictions, I did call a draw actually in Inchicore. I did
Yeah,
say
you
I
did.
did I
Yeah, I
did say
remember
one
that. Yeah.
all. So I'm not doing too bad. I'll wait till I get a few absolute stinkers in, and then I'll just stop predicting scores. But let's say 2-0 Shells in Dalymount, and 2-1 Shells in Tolka.
Fingers crossed. Dunny, thanks for all your time tonight. There's a lot to get through. And as always, thanks to everyone for listening. Enjoy the games later in the week and leave us any comments or questions. And we will speak to you next week.